That music must mean one thing. It's the return of Whisky Unscripted. Let me guess, season 7, episode 3. Good afternoon, guys.
There's been a bit of a gap between 2 and 3. I'm afraid, folks, we've been a bit busy with holidays and being away and a whole range of different things. So hence the gap, but it's great to be back.
It is great to be back, Gordon. And on that topic of gaps, Rosebank stills going very quiet and then working again, 30 years. Top Gun Maverick, 36 years. And one of the biggest gaps between albums, ABBA, 39 years, 11 months, and 6 days between albums. That's longer, Gordon, than the last time you bought me around. So gaps are in show business. Just live with it.
Yeah, it is. No, absolutely. And yeah, for those who maybe don't know what we're sort of aiming at here, we did fill the first cask of Rosebank this week, which was fabulous. Cask number 1.
Oh, yes.
Filled by Leonard Russell. And that is the end of a long journey. Yeah, a really, really exciting moment. So now fabulous.
We just talked about this being a little update, and we're going to do a show with Malcolm Rennie, the manager, maybe even Leonard. We're going to do a Rosebank, and we'll catch up with other whiskies out there. But this is just a little catch up with ourselves. But what? You were there, Gordon.
I was. And it was an amazing thing to see. It was a refill bourbon barrel, which is what we would expect for Rosebank, the type of casks we're going to be using, very much a spirit-driven whiskey. But yeah, really good to see it getting filled. I mean, it wasn't, if I'm honest, when you're there, it was great to see everybody there, but the filling process is a bit like filling up your car, if I'm honest. It's not, it's like watching somebody put petrol in their car, if I'm honest. But it was still very exciting, either end of that. And to have a filled cask is fabulous. And I don't know when we'll see that one in market, but yeah, no, great day after. This was announced back in October 2017, so we're close to 6 years after we announced anything about Rosebank. So yeah, it's a long journey.
And I don't want to speak to Malcolm and maybe even being there, but what's it like?
I've had
last time I was there, the stills were coming in. There was no roof. So what's it like just as a building?
Look, as a building, it's unbelievably amazing. It's a beautiful layout, beautiful design. And people will be able to see it from next year. We're not going to be having really any visits until next year, but there's a very, very obvious sort of flow through production, how the distillery works, unlike the old Rosebank, which was very disjointed. So really, really excited to have people there next year. But also the other thing is, of course, is that Malcolm's working really hard to iron out one or two small things as well there. So it's the same with all new distilleries, but to have a spirit now is fabulous. And congratulations to him and the team. They've made a really, really lovely spirit. So we'll speak to Malcolm next time.
Oh yes, okay. Lots of, and of course we're not the only ones. There's lots of new distilleries out there, which I'd like to get my teeth right into. Maybe the next episode, but one I think it's capturing a lot of attention is it the UK or the world's only vertical distillery?
Yes,
the Port of Leith. Do you know much about what's happening down there?
I don't, if I'm honest, and I have been promised a visit, and I must go. But like all these things, Gordon, as you know, we're quite busy doing what we need to do.
Yes.
And we do have to remember to look up and see what else other people are doing and go and visit other distilleries and things like that. But
well, you know them.
I do have to go. Yeah, we do know them, and it'll be lovely to go and see a vertical distillery. And I think obviously, lack of pumps, gravity does a lot of the work, so that's always good. So I'm intrigued to see how that works, but I must get there. But there's, as you say, there's so many other small distilleries all over the place. And distilleries opening up. Moffat Distillery is one which I've come across very recently. A little distillery run by a couple down in Moffat in the Borders. Not a particularly big distillery, but like very small, but going to have a great visitor experience. These things are fabulous, you know, and it's great to just see the diversity of whiskey distilleries now.
That's the I know, hopefully get a little bit of history in this show, but that is what they're saying about booms and busts from the past, the present, the Victorian. This was we're looking like what happened in the 1890s, but what didn't happen in the 1890s was maybe that diversity. Not only the tourism that you've just mentioned, but a great visitor experience wrapped around that Moffat place, but just different sizes and different shapes and different styles. It's so much more diverse.
Well, totally. And I think that's because single malt is now a thing. You know, 100 odd years ago, even 50 years ago, single malt was a blend ingredient, for want of a better. It was a feature of blends. It wasn't, so each single malt wasn't a brand in itself. It was just a business to business transactions. Here, buy some of my, you know, Rosebank as a top dresser, or buy some of my, you know, my Isla or whatever. Now it's a totally different sphere, totally different, you know, market. And what will it be like in 8, 9, 10 years when we see that new Rosebank from Cask 1 coming out? That'll be interesting to see.
Okay, Gordon, that's going to be great. So we're not even, that's just a little preamble to what are you drinking. But later on, if you stay with the podcast, I want to talk a little bit about travel retail, cocktails, with our latest colleague that's joining us, Ian McLeod's. We'll be hearing from Mike Brown, talking cocktails. But also, Gordon, we've travelled. I want to talk about travelling. And I just think, could we put together between now and the end of the podcast, and you know nothing about this, a little seaside, whiskies by the seaside? Because in this hot weather, and we're having all over Europe, apart from maybe Scotland, oh, I do like to be beside the seaside. And if there's a distillery right next to it, even better.
Okay.
So let's try and put that together, Gordon. Oh, I do.
Well, I mean, there's a
what?
Well, I mean, the ones that spring to mind immediately are things like, you know, the ones on Isla, obviously.
Yes. Okay.
By the sea. So you've probably got probably 6 or 7 by the sea.
So got Isla there by the sea. So just put them in maybe
6 or 7 there on Isla, or 7 or 8.
So just get to Isla, get to the seaside. Boom, that's it. Before we get into that, my first question is, what are you drinking?
Oh, right.
That was what I was going to say.
Sorry.
All that to come. But first, what are you drinking?
Well, I'm actually in the office as we currently speak, and what I've got in front of me, is a batch strength. I've got a little bit of batch strength number 1, funnily enough, from Tamdhu, which I've got a little bit of a tiny little bit in the glass just to have a little nose of, and I'm actually driving, to be honest, so I'm not drinking it, but a little bit of batch strength number 1, which you cannot get a hold of.
No.
A fabulous whiskey. The first batch strength from Tamdhu, of course, all sherry cask. Beautiful.
Yes.
What about yourself?
Oh, that's lovely. I am drinking why we've not done the podcast. I'm drinking the reason we haven't recorded. And I'm drinking a little Isle of Skye 12-year-old.
Yes.
It's an absolute cracking blended whiskey. We're going to talk about blends shortly, but this is a combination of Highland whiskies, honeyed sweetness, combined with the island whiskies. You know, Skye will be in there. That smokiness as well, and it comes together. Lovely 12-year-olds, and it's aged. Gordon, it's a blend that's been aged, so it goes from 8 to 12 to 18 to 21, 25, and 30, and the 12 was going great guns in the States where I was traveling. So,
where did you go in the States, Gordon?
Well, actually, I don't know if it was planned, but Ian McLeod sent Gordon Dallas to Dallas, which, you know, Debbie does Dallas, Dallas does Dallas. It was a wonderful trip with Isle of Skye through Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington, on a plane down to Houston, and then did about 2-3 days around the circuits of Houston. Now, 2 things came out of this trip. I'd never been to the States before, and I'd never.
Is that your first time in the US?
Yes. We do Europe, and you know, I do seasides in the UK.
Personally, you've never been in the US?
No.
Oh, what did you think of the US?
It was, well, that's my point. I have never been to these liquor stores. I've heard of them, and I was not expecting. And people listening to this in the States will think, well, what's we just do not have that kind of size and breadth of choice in the UK. They were liquor stores, and this one was Total Wines, were simply phenomenal. I just wish we had them here, Gordon. Discuss liquor stores. I just couldn't believe it.
Well, let's just go with the thing about everything in America is bigger.
Yeah.
Generally better, not always, but generally bigger. Everything's bigger. Cars, everything's bigger. The country, bigger.
Yeah.
The roads, bigger. The liquor stores, bigger. Yeah, I mean, Total Wine and More is really transforming the US liquor market, and you know, it's a great sort of business model, and we do sell some of our whiskies via Total Wine and More, and yeah, no, it's as you know from your
believe,
perspective,
Gordon, sorry to cut across, I believe it's because their supermarkets where you buy food are restricted from selling spirits and maybe beers and light alcohols, like wines.
That's right.
Is that right?
Very different to the UK, where you have wine aisles and beer aisles, and that's true in quite a lot of places. Holland is similar. You have to go into a separate part of the supermarket to buy alcohol. Right. You know, whereas in the UK, you just wander down that wine aisle and you stick in your bottle of, you know, whiskey or your bottle of wine in with your bananas and your cereal or whatever.
And before I went, Gordon, I would say that's what I want. I like freedom. I want to go to my supermarket, not have to go to another store somewhere. After visiting these liquor stores and Total, I would say yes, I will trade off. Only being able to buy maybe beers or wines in that super. If I could go to a huge store with well-educated staff that know their stuff.
Yeah, look, I think if you have a separate store like Total Wine, you have a larger selection than you would ever have in a normal supermarket like we have in the UK. So you go to a big UK supermarket, it's maybe a couple of aisles. There's only so many bottles they'll have on the shelf, whereas in Total Wine, it's a warehouse effectively. It's it's a wine and spirits warehouse, and they serve a great purpose, but that is not to the detriment of a specialist whiskey store as well, which is a really important way of understanding your whiskey and maybe getting even those more sort of diverse bottles than even Total Wine may have. So, you know, there's 2 or 3 things to look at. Total Wine serves an absolute purpose, as does a specialist whiskey store in the States or here.
And I think what was interesting for my visit, I'd like to hear where you were, Gordon, but for my visit, decided not to drive myself. I've never driven in the States.
That was a good idea.
And I thought maybe people, you know, with firearms or licensed, I didn't want to cut MD up, but didn't want to be cut up by a... So I took Ubers everywhere. And I tell you what, if you want to see America and understand the Americans, being in maybe 24, 25 Ubers with 24, 25 different people from the States is fascinating. And I'm not going into details, apart from my Puerto Rican chap, one phone, one hand in the wheel, one hand in the phone, screaming at someone down the phone in another in Spanish while leaving the freeway because it was full, to go into a small road to go back on the freeway. I took a video of it just in case I never made it home, but it was fascinating to see the States, and I would love to go back again. Absolutely great people, great thirst for Scotch whiskey. And on that point of Isle of Skye, I'm not, because there's other great whiskies on the shelves, but what they really enjoyed, Gordon, not only was the video from Isle of Skye itself, very popular across here in the States. Isle of Skye, it's like Middle Earth. It's like something like a Game of Thrones. So it goes down very well when you shoot videos of it. The whiskey itself, aged down very well. But also a little rumour about Al Capone coming across in the late 1920s, possibly to play golf on the Isle of Skye with the original Ian MacLeod. So only a rumour, but that went down very well. And when I come back, I went on to the internet just to search Al Capone in Scotland, and yes, his great
when was he in Scotland?
His great granddaughter, and maybe my niece. I've got the book up here. I was reading a wee bit of it yesterday. Did write about Al Capone, her uncle's secret trips to from America to St Andrews, almost definitely, and was it Turnberry as well? He got a set of golf clubs made that were flown back to the States. So he was in Scotland. I think it's indisputable. Whether he made it to the Isle of Skye It's only a rumour on the island. But all these things go down very well, Gordon. And when I was researching that last couple of days, up comes a Polish company called Bartex Bartol, who created a Tommy gun whiskey bottle in the shape of a Tommy gun, which the Portman Group, who look after Scotch whisky, said you cannot have a bottle of whiskey in the shape of a gun. The connection between alcohol and violence is, but they were just trying to recreate that Capone era of prohibition in America. So it's still making news headlines today. So
that's unbelievable.
All these.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I've come up with a few since I've been in whiskey. I've come across a few stories, obviously, with Capone. I'm just going to mention a couple which are quite interesting. I used to go to Kentucky a lot, and I used to stay in the Sealback Hilton, which is a very famous hotel in Louisville. And in there, Capone was well known to frequent the Sealback. There used to be special hiding areas within the hotels that when the authorities came, he could hide and not be found in the Sealback while obviously doing some dodgy dealings during Prohibition. There's a prime example. The other one that springs to mind was when I went to Canadian Club. Canadian Club is just over the water from Detroit, so it's in Windsor in Canada, literally over the water. So you fly into Detroit, you get a taxi through the tunnel, through the border, and you're in Canada, but you're literally just over the river from Detroit. And in the Canadian Club Visitor Centre, I used to work for Canadian Club, part of Beam Suntory. There's a meeting room at the bottom of it, and I was in there with the Canadian Club team, and there's bullet holes in the wall of this thing, and this is where he used to come and obviously during Prohibition, obviously get over the water from Detroit and start to get some of that good old liquor getting imported into illegally imported into America during Prohibition. So his influence in whiskey was huge, and certainly some interesting stories. So it'd be interesting to see if he ever was on Sky.
Ever was on Sky. I know, I love it. I'm just holding you up a book, and I will do more about books and whiskey. One of my favourites, and we don't know much about Alan Andrews, but he wrote a book called The Whisky Barons, and it's about all the whisky barons like Haig and Jew becoming lords of the British Empire by their whisky making. But there's a lovely picture in it of Legs Diamond going to Berry Brothers in St James's, who are purveyors of spirits and wines to the king. And here's Legs Diamond walking down the street with his nose bent and two henchmen each side of him. And they were going literally with cash in hand to buy Cutty Sark and any other whiskey that Berry Brothers would sell them and ship to the Bahamas. It's a great book.
Unbelievable.
The Irish said, no, we're not going to sell to organised crime. And other members of the British retail establishment said, organised what? No. We'll sell our whiskey.
Walked past Berry Brothers the other day when I was in London. I was in London a couple of weeks ago and walked straight past Berry Brothers. It's always something to behold. I believe there historically was tunnels from the cellars of Berry Brothers straight into the something like that, straight into the royal palaces as well.
That would be a lovely visit to go and see. Gordon, we've not even touched on the news. As part of the podcast, Whisky Unscripted, we're recording here, and we'll tell you it is sort of get on to the last week in July 2023. Anything that's caught your eye? I think some sad news, but anything else that's caught your eye in the world of whiskey?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of sad news. Unfortunately, if you come to Glasgow, people always talk about probably two whiskey bars that you would go to: the Pot Still and the Bon Accord. The Bon Accord in Charing Cross has been a whiskey bar that I think in the last 10, 15 years has become one of the best in the world. Offers a different experience to the Pot Still, and was run by a gentleman called Paul McDonagh, who was a larger than life character whose love of whiskey and love of the sort of pub atmosphere created a fantastic pub called the Bon Accord. And I've spent a lot of time in there. I'm a member of the Bon Accord Whiskey Club, having done a tasting there. And unfortunately, he passed away this week. And just some of the tributes we've seen online from, his influence, across the industry is huge. He was involved in setting up and building up the Glasgow Whisky Festival. he really is someone who always had a smile, always had time for you, and it's a real sad time that he's not with us anymore. So I want to raise a little bit of my whiskey to him, to Paul. We will miss you, my friend, and thank you for everything you've done for this industry.
Wonderful words, Gordon. Wonderful words. And like early 60s. I mean, far too early.
Yeah, I think far too early. Yeah, I don't know the ins and outs, but just far too early, unfortunately.
So and again,
so we will miss him.
We'll absolutely. And the Whisky Festival that was, as you say, part of and integral to, is going to grow and grow, and that'll be a great testament and a great legacy to talk about.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful, Gordon. It's middle of summer. There's not much news around. Many releases during the summer months, or are they all stacking up for the autumn and winter?
Well, I mean, I was thinking about this. I think there's quite a lot of whiskies coming. I think if you look at the new distilleries that have launched whiskies in the last couple of years, there's been quite a lot, and there's still a hell of a lot of new distilleries that haven't released anything. So, it'll be interesting to see what the the ones like, what's it called? I'm trying to remember what it's called now. Just past Tormore when you're driving up to Speyside. Ballindalloch.
Ballindalloch, yes.
Ballindalloch, I don't think it's released a whiskey as yet, and that's been there for a while. So, I mean, that'll be quite interesting. And then you think of all the other distilleries which we've heard of, and some of them have released some things and some haven't, and it'd be interesting to see how some of these distilleries continue to decide at what point they're going to release something, because you've got to remember the economics of making whiskey at the moment are way, way higher than they probably have been. So, it depends on a lot of different things in terms of, how they're funded and things like that.
When to release it and all that. Another topic, Gordon, before we get our Mike Brown on to talk cocktails and to do a couple of challenges. Oh, by the way, the Coastal Top 10, could I, and it's a place I used to go on holiday, could I forward the distillery of Brora, right up there in the north of Scotland, on the east coast. Not only famous for a football team, but a couple of great golf courses. If you like your golf, I used to play Brora myself. In fact, one of my best rounds ever was in the course of Brora. And if you ever go up there, now's a wonderful distillery, but the golf course has got that electrified fence around the greens to stop the sheep nibbling the greens. And you just have to step over the small fence. And I remember my friend saying, I don't think it's electrified. It was. And so Brora is quite nice, little seaside top 10. Gordon's given us Isla, there's Brora, and we'll come back to it, Gordon. Maybe Mike will give us a couple as well. But
there's another one that I like to bring up.
Oh, yes.
There's another one that I think is goes against a lot of what you think about distilleries and their location. For me, this is almost the sort of antithesis of where it is to a certain extent. So if we go to Orkney, we think of Highland Park, but there is another distillery in Orkney.
There is?
Scapa.
Hey, Scapa.
Now, Scapa is by the sea, but it doesn't have that. It's a light style whiskey. It doesn't have that sort of by the sea style. It's for me, it's always been a little bit more of that sort of lighter, sort of typical. I don't know. You wouldn't, if you picked it up, you wouldn't necessarily think it was. It was located where it is, if you know what I mean. And there are those examples of the fact that I guess it's to do with the production, the type of casks they use, but it really has a style that doesn't reflect where it's from, in my view.
That's very good. So if you listen to this, have a think about other coasts. Doesn't need to be Scotland. Could be down in England. Could be Wales. Could be across in the States. But just a little seaside for our sort of holiday, sort of late July podcast. Gordon, before we get Mike on, we talked about travelling, and I have to say, you always get there early because I was always, worried about missing the flight. How good is it to ponder and browse these travel retail shops in the airports? Are you a fan of walking around travel retail? And could you explain the differences between the whiskey outside an airport and inside the airports?
Well, if I'm honest, I would say that for years, and I'm probably talking 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, travel retail was a dearth of whiskey, if I'm honest.
Okay.
I thought the offerings in travel retail were pretty awful. A bit vanilla, a litre of vanilla type sort of thing.
Trying to give people cheap. It was most
yeah,
of
and you were buying a
cheap,
litre bottles, and I thought it was a bit of a dumping ground for average single malt, if I'm honest, for some brands. And the key things to remember is that that's probably changed now. And travel retail, I think, will become a really powerful area, because I think there's two things that will affect it. The first is that they will be getting rid of that 100 ml traveling liquid thing, which I think will make more people more confident about buying travel retail products. Because at the moment, I think if you're transferring on a flight and you don't really know, so if you're from,
I've done that.
If you're flying from Scotland to somewhere, you generally go through London or Amsterdam or Frankfurt or something like that. And I think people go, I want to buy a bottle of whiskey, but I'm not too convinced about the sort of aspect of that 100 ml things. And it's not clear when
No.
So I think that's got something to do with it. I think the other thing is, of course, that I think travel retail will become more and more popular. So historically, what has been done and will always be done is that we produce a different range for travel retail, so that there's no issues in terms of pricing with relation to the domestic market. Also, generally at the lower price points in travel retail, you get a litre bottle. That's really linked to the fact that most countries have a sort of 1 litre, 2 litre limit on what you can bring in. So having a litre bottle rather than a 700 ml bottle makes a lot more sense. So there's that. And I think if we look at Asia, travel retail's always been big in Asia, and I think it will grow, and it's a really important channel. And I think in Europe, it's will come back from where it's been. America's the one where it's never really been the size it has done, because 90% of flights in America are internal. So it's really only the big airports, the sort of Atlantas and the those type of airports that have any real travel retail offering. San Francisco, LA, because you're going to Asia or Australia or something like that. But I think travel retail will become really a real important market. And I generally, from a consumer perspective, think the quality of the whiskies and the diversity of the whiskies is only going to improve.
Oh, that's excellent.
And we produce some cracking whiskies.
Well, I've got a little list. I've got a little list of others, but I just thought, since we're a producer ourselves and we're in there, what's the highlights that Ian McLeod have got inside airports that people might want to look out for, that's maybe different from the shelves outside?
Yeah, I mean, the one there's a few that stand out for me. Tamdhu Grand Reserva, what a wonderful whiskey. That is a first fill only, limited edition, 46% all sherry cask European oak, brilliant whiskey. Fabulous. And from a Glengoyne angle, I think the only product we actually finish in our whole range, which is a 15-year-old finished in Pedro Jimenez casks. What a wonderful whiskey that is. And it just shows you finishing is very much a valid option for whiskey, even though we don't generally do a lot of it. This whiskey drives a brilliant sort of rich style finish. So those two whiskies are a real standout for me in travel retail. But yeah, I mean, I think, across the range, across the scope of whiskies now, there is a better offering than there was 5 years ago in travel retail, which is great for everybody.
Well, here we go. Just before we get Mike on, Matt Chambers. I'm going to give him
saw him the other week.
Did you? He's put together a lovely article on travel retail from the last 6-8 months. Matt Chambers behind is it not
Whisky for Everyone?
Whisky for Everyone. Sorry, Whisky for Well done, Matt. So, Matt, Gordon, just a wee comment on his sort of top takes in travel retail, or ones that he says are very interesting. Here we go. Ballantyne's 23-year-old. He said it's a blends, high proportion of single malt and single grain whiskies. A lovely, again, an aged blend, Gordon. We talked about that with
There's not many of them.
No.
There's not many aged blends. Ballantyne's a legendary name in Scotch whisky. I'm sure it's fabulous. I've not tasted it.
Here's one that you'll know of, but you cannot walk through many airports without seeing a picture of a motor car, which is an Aston Martin. And of course, it's the Bowmore Aston Martin 10-year-old.
I haven't tasted it for a while. I'm sure it is look, the Bowmore, in my book, produces some really good whiskies. I think the 10-year-old is probably either 40 or 43. I'm just trying to think what the cask makeup of it is. I can't quite remember.
Yeah, it's the
sherry and bourbon.
18, but it doesn't break it down there. But yeah, I think
it's sherry and bourbon from what I can remember. Like,
I'm
sure it's very, very good. I'm not sure how the inclusion of Aston Martin has made it any different, probably. But yep, no, great whiskey.
It's just an example of something you can't get. Here's another interesting one you can't get outside an airport. Chivas Regal, 18-year-olds, but finished in Mizunara oak casks from Japan.
There you go. Now that's a blend finished in Mizunara. Again, I've never tasted it.
I know.
But again, the point is, and the wider point is here, consider blends. Blends are a good option. Blended malt as well. I was talking about that the other day with my friend Mark Gillespie from Whisky Cast. Blended malts and blends are a valid choice. Do not drink them because of the word blend. There's my tip of the day.
Sort of perception, maybe rightly from a few years ago, but I think now the quality is. Yeah. Just a couple more. It's just to let people know what's out there. It's just interesting. Glendronach have got a 10-year-old named after an area in Aberdeenshire called Forgue. Forgue, I don't know how you pronounce that. Forgue. Ex-sherry casks, of course, and don't get that outside of the airport.
For those sherry cask lovers, a lot of people love Glendronach. Every Glendronach I've had has been a great whiskey, good whiskies. They use Oloroso, they use PX as well, so a little bit different to Tamdhu. But if you were to mention 5 sherry cask whiskies, Glendronach would be in there. So yeah, I'm sure it's great.
The Lagavulin 10 he picks up as well. So that's
Lagavulin. There's a product that's been dominated by the 16, and the 16 is a legendary whiskey. I love Lagavulin 16. I'm sure the 10 is fabulous, and again, exclusive to that channel. So if you're a Lagavulin fan or an Islay whiskey fan or just like good whiskey, why would you not pick that up?
And just a couple more. He's got a Teeling Explorers 12-year-olds. Teeling doing very well, Gordon. The Spirit of Dublin.
Yeah, Teeling's been going for a few years. So if it's a 12-year-old, I think that's probably from the old stocks of Teeling. I don't think it's the new Teeling. Again, sure, it's really, really good. And Irish whiskey is... You do see a lot of Irish whiskey, and one of my favourites, Connemara, is always well priced in travel retail.
Penderyn, where are open, we'll talk about this maybe later in the series, but their third distillery in Wales has now opens, and he picks up they've got one called Faraday, named after the guy that designed, they made the whiskey. So Penderyn Faraday, only available in the airports. Gordon?
Penderyn, I've drunk Penderyn. What's really interesting about Penderyn is it's got a very, very high spirit strength. I think its spirit strength is above 90. So it's getting on to this level, although it's distilled not in I think there's an element of, there's a column still and a sort of pot still. I'm not 100% sure, but it is a very high spirit strength. So how they've developed that and used that with casks to produce these whiskies is quite interesting, because generally when you're getting up to that strength, you may have a little less flavor, but I'm intrigued how they then use that in their whiskies. So Penderyn is great.
And the point being is, what you've just chatted here, if you've got an hour to spend in an airport, my goodness, what lovely browsing you can do. And finally, of course, they mentioned you cannot talk about travel retail without talking about Macallan and some of their boutiques. I was in the one in Terminal 5 recently, so they are main big players in the world of travel retail.
Oh, yeah, no, travel retail is important for Macallan like it is for anybody else, and they spend pretty big in London with their boutique, and they have rare whiskies. And if you've got the WAD,
yes,
why not? If you haven't, buy something else.
You were traveling in Asia, but you've traveled all over. If you're at an airport, top 3, top 5 good airports to buy whiskey at. What's the good one?
Well, these are. I think Singapore stands out as probably one of the best. Although I've not been to Singapore airport for a few years, but it's probably one of the best in terms of the experience of buying whiskey. Other ones that are good, Taiwan has a very unique selection of whiskies because of that unique market. You know, in that market, single malt outsells any other style of whiskey. It's unbelievable. So Taiwan is a good market. And then if we come closer to home, I think Heathrow, of course, is good. And in Europe, you know, there's one or two stores. Another one that's actually quite good is Sydney, Australia.
You said that about the accent, which is unusual.
Did I? So yeah, I mean, the one, if you said to me, you can go to one airport to buy whiskey, I'd probably go to Singapore.
Oh, good. Right. Okay.
Maybe Hong Kong, but Singapore.
And that's
but what's really interesting about travel retail is, and this is what's going to change it, is there's an island off China called Hainan. And Hainan is part of China, but they've made it a travel retail area. So all the travel retail sort of rules apply from within China. So what you're getting is a lot of Chinese going to Hainan, still staying in China, and then going home again, buying whiskey. And all that money stays in China. So it's becoming the center of travel retail whiskies.
Yeah, that looks, they're pumping a lot of money into that one. That's it. It's very good. And this is the part of the show, I should say, if you want to win first class tickets to Singapore, but we don't have the budget. So that's competition is not happening. Speaking of competitions, we're going to do some very shortly, Gordon. We've got a new challenge for you. But let's bring in a new colleague. Gordon, do you want to do the honors?
Well, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, Michael Brown. Good to have Michael on the team. Michael is now going to be out and about, and has been out and about doing all of our sort of ambassadorial work in market. So you'll probably see Michael here and there. Came from Edinburgh Gin, so we've turned him from Edinburgh Gin to whiskey, and he's taken to it like a duck to water, and it's great to have Michael on board.
Okay, let's speak to him.
Welcome to Whisky Unscripted.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now, part of your induction, and it wasn't, it's by, volunteering, you listened to, I think, every episode.
Yeah, I did. It was a tough slog. I'd sometimes stay on the bus and go past my work just so I could get the extra.
That's
20 minutes.
That's
it was good chat. It was good chat.
And Gordon, on that point of listening to, you have had a member of the public email you about where the podcast was. Where were we?
I did. No, I did. I mean, I have had somebody wondering when the next one was coming, and it's quite interesting that we do actually have people that listen to this. It's quite unbelievable.
Yeah. So, Michael, how's it been in the first few weeks? Just to paint a picture of being a whiskey ambassador, because it's a job that I think a lot of people can do, would like to do, and
yeah. It's quite an amazing job. A lot of people meet me and they say, the first thing, you'll probably hear this all the time as well, wish I could have your job. It's a really, really fun job to do. It's been quite manic. It's been a lot of traveling. In my first kind of reins off, here you go, you're an ambassador, I went to Poland for a wine and whiskey festival, which was absolutely incredible. I was in Krakow, I was in Warsaw. Then the week after, I was in Hamburg. And then I felt like I really made it when I went straight from Hamburg to Morecambe. And I felt like I'm global now. So that was really, really good.
A lovely coastal village in coastal town in the UK, but no distillery, Gordon. So that will not be part of our top 10.
No,
but we'll just do a top 10 seaside distilleries. We are in July. It is summertime in the UK.
Oh, so, fantastic!
And I'll just put up Port of Leith, Gordon, just along the coast from the Edinburgh beach. So Port of Leith would be another seaside distillery, along with Brora and the Islay ones. So we're getting up there to 10. If you get any more, Michael, chuck it in.
Yeah, well, Isle of Harris Distillery.
Oh, yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Have they released a whiskey yet?
So it's actually, from my understanding, due to be released, I think it's November this year. Will be their first launch. So obviously they've had the gin for quite a while. If you've been to the distillery, you'll know how amazing it is when you're kind of coming into the shore at Harris. It just looks absolutely incredible. So I'm really looking forward to trying it. Hopefully soon.
We were just discussing earlier in the podcast about smaller distilleries who hadn't launched a whiskey, and there's another one. So yeah. Interesting. No, I'm sure it'll be good.
And
people involved up there.
It was just distilleries you can visit with a bucket and spade and a little pair of trunks, and you can go round the distillery, then make a little distillery of sand afterwards. That, to me, would be, with a few drinks, a perfect day. So,
Tobermory.
Oh, yeah.
Tobermory. I mean, obviously, all the ones that we've sort of, there's the ones on Arran as well. I mean,
I was going to say, does Arran count? Yeah.
But I mean, I think, it's always interesting when you talk about whiskies and you talk about, people you throw the word terroir around a lot in whiskey, and terroir for me is what does that actually mean from a perspective of whiskey? Now, if you're maturing a whiskey in a warehouse by the sea, it's going to taste different than if you matured a whiskey in the middle of a forest in the middle of Scotland. Those, because over 10 years, you're going to have different influences. There's no doubt. Is that terroir? I don't know.
Well, on my travels, Gordon, I went to the Waterford website, and there is a link to I think a university peer-reviewed subject on terroir that they say proves their terroir, and you go on it, and it's quite a vast sort of academic paper on terroir in Waterford, and it was wonderful. I think it was asleep the time we left runway 3. It was wonderful, but it's very interesting, and they believe
but that's about barley.
Yeah, and that's the only way I think terroir works in whiskey. And if you want to know more about it, we have an episode with Dr. George Papadopoulos in the Athens Bar Show a few seasons ago. Michael probably listened to it about 4 times.
I actually did, yeah. Stayed on the number 44 a couple of times for that one. Riveting. It was actually really interesting to hear someone who is a complete expert on, I think, wine and whiskey, and to hear his relationship between terroir, because it's interesting, isn't it? I think if you're coming from a wine background, then whiskey doesn't have the same relationship with terroir as it does, but I don't know, it does as well, like your analogy of leaving the car in the forest and leaving it on the coast.
Yeah. And tequila. Michael, your background's in cocktails as well.
It is,
Gordon, I think you'll agree with me, on a hot day, sometimes you like to have your whiskey long. Now, you did a video, Michael, with a cocktail of Glengoyne.
I did, yeah.
And a little bit of negative feedback. There's still 1 or 2 people out there that don't like single malt being adulterated like that.
Yeah, really interesting. My first bit of hate mail.
I wouldn't say it's people
not
passionate about their single malt. They just don't like to see it diluted.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of conversations with even whiskey ambassadors as well. A lot of people, purists would probably be the best way to describe them. They say there's nothing you can put into a whiskey until it's another whiskey. That's the only thing you can really put in. To that, I would say that's just one way of drinking whiskey. If you're looking at it as an ingredient, then as an old fashioned, absolutely fantastic. I think the cocktail, the old fashioned, actually probably predates the usage of the word single malt, or certainly as popular as it is now. So it's a very old cocktail anyway.
Just explain it. What is the cocktail? Was that what you were making?
Yes, so it's sort of like a riff on an old fashioned. So an old fashioned is usually just 2 shots, traditionally a whiskey. It can be any spirit. So it can be a gin. You can have a gin old fashioned or a tequila old fashioned, but it's usually going to be a bourbon. We've gone for obviously a Glengoyne 12. Then it's going to be some bitters. As a bartender, it's totally up to yourself as to what you would like to use. Angostura is probably the most famous one, although orange works very, very well with whiskey as well. And then some syrups, some sugar element to it, whether it be sugar cube or kind of simple syrup or a brown sugar. And it's that blueprint that you can utilize to make cocktails. And it's just another way of drinking whiskey, for some people, if they want to be a purist about a single malt, that's totally fine. But for other people that might not be kind of as committed to not putting anything into their whiskey, or they're new to whiskey, it's a great way of getting people into drinking drams, which I think is important as well. So, and if you've not had an old fashioned, I mean, don't knock it till you've not tried it. So,
Gordon, the debate. Totally. I noticed that people were getting back to Michael and saying this isn't. We're not happy about this. So that attitude is still out there. For whatever we say, it's still out there. But
I mean, look, it's like everything in life, And I think one of the things is you do what you want to do with a bottle of whiskey or your drink. If you want to add water, you want to put, ice, or you want to put diet lilt in it, it's up to you. You know, I think that's even maybe worse than normal lilt. But my point is, it's totally up to you. I don't, you decide how you drink whiskey. The fact you're drinking it is fabulous, and you shouldn't impose your view on other people. It's it's like everything in life. It's up to you. And when I was in Taiwan, I drank whiskey with ice so much because it was so warm. When I was in Japan, and I love, in hot countries, I love a highball.
And just for the benefits of the listeners, he puts his hands above his head, which I believe is a tradition with Gordon Dundas and his friends in a Japanese bar.
Highball. It was during the Rugby World Cup. We were slightly over-refreshed potentially. But then when you're in Islay in November and it's dark at 4 o'clock, I want a strong whiskey. If I'm on Speyside, I'm standing by the Spey. I want a gentle sherry cask Tamdu, tasty. Yeah. This is why it's such a great product. So, I'm all for mixology. I'm all for pairings, and I'm doing a tasting tonight in the Ubiquitous Chip in Glasgow. We're doing food pairings and whiskey. Why not? Let's do it.
And Michael, if I was saying, for listeners to have a go at a summer cocktail, because some might be winter, some people are listening to this other parts, but in Northern Europe, where we're broadcasting, summer drink, long, what would you, with whiskey at its core, what's a lovely one that's refreshing from your background?
So, I mean, yeah, like you're talking about highballs, they're absolutely fantastic. You can play on those as well. You can choose another spirit and mixer. Certainly whiskey and ginger ale works really, really well. It's really refreshing. Lots of really good ice that I think is quite important as well. You can certainly use the stuff from the freezer if you just make it in your house as well. It's all about, I think when you're talking about cocktails and that kind of word mixology, it's very similar to cooking. If you're passionate about it, you can learn different techniques. You can learn different flavors that go together very well. I actually don't like the word mixologist. I prefer the term liquid chef. There you go.
I used to know a Little Chef. It was a great place. It did an Olympic breakfast.
Okay, I thought you were talking about me there for a second. All right, an actual place, right? An Olympic breakfast. Right, okay. Gordon, we're getting to the end of the show, and I've got a couple of challenges.
We love a challenge.
And I thought maybe you could keep Mike on here to help you. So you can play this at home, folks. Play this at home. I've not got a title for it. Just I struggle sometimes with social media. I don't mind.
Sometimes.
It's just these linking hashtags. And if you don't know the person you're hashtagging, you've got to go and search. Oh my, it's just, anyway, some people can do the. So I thought, hashtag challenge. So I'm going to start off, just name the distillery, and I'm going to start off with a nice, easy one. Gordon, if I was having to do a posting with this distillery, here's my hashtags. Hashtag 1779. Hashtag Lochendal.
Bowmore.
Boom. Bowmore. Hashtag number one vaults. Hashtag Aston Martin. Okay?
Nice.
So you see where we're going?
Yes.
So I am doing a posting about this distillery. Hashtag Inchmooren. Hashtag Michael Henry. Hashtag Open Golf.
I know, but Michael Brown, you can answer this one.
He's dropped you in.
I knew the Bowmore one, but
I know this one.
Over to Mr. Dundas.
Loch Lomond.
Loch Lomond's the sponsors of the Open Golf, I think, for another 5 years.
Yes, and that starts today.
That's right. We're broadcasting that the sort of the actual day of the Open Golf Championship. And I'm loving the Tour de France, by the way. Loving the Tour de France. So a summer of sport. Wonderful. Here we go. I'm writing about another distillery, but oh my God, these hashtags are killing me. Hashtags Borrowdale House. Hashtag Arrow One. Hashtag Alistair Day. Hashtag Macrahanish. That's an interesting one. It's not Macrahanish. I think the first hashtag, Borrowdale House, would maybe be the...
you've got me confused there. I know the answer to this one, I think.
Yes.
I've got no idea. Absolutely no idea.
I'd like to stay at Borrowdale House, but that's the hashtag.
Isle of Rassay.
It is Isle of Rassay, who are opening up or building A distillery.
A distillery in Campbelltown, yeah.
That's right. And finally, in our hashtag challenge, I'm writing about the distillery, but oh, here we go. In all the social media departments, you have to do this. Hashtag Lowland Malt. Hashtag Ducot. Hashtag Balcomie. Hashtag Weems.
Oh, King's Barnes.
Boom, 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 boom. He has come in there at the end.
There we go.
Mike Brown. Gordon,
go.
Mikey, just a quick word. King's Barnes, great distillery.
Yeah, great story behind it as well, actually. Great distillery, good friends who work there. I don't know how big it is. What's its capacity? I'm not sure. But I've never been, but I must go again. Another distillery I must visit at some point.
We got all these lovely invites, but that's that challenge. Can you see that working? Can we?
I think that's a good one.
Thank you.
I think we should do that again.
They've got a great sherry cask, King's Barnes, but it's a Solero sherry cask. It's very, very different to the kind of style that we do with Glengoyne and Tam Dhu.
Sort of, they put it all into one type thing.
Yeah.
Really nice. No, good.
So the last part before we head off into the July and early August, I just think we have to finish with you have arrived at your whiskey destination.
Yay! Back by popular demand. We've had literally an email about it.
And before we do that, Gordon, any last shout for Seaside Distilleries? We could potentially, we talked about Glenmorangie.
Oban.
Red Door.
Oban. Yes.
Seven Door, is it? Seven Door?
Yeah.
Where's Seven Door Distillery? That's by the sea, isn't it?
That is, I'm sure it is by the sea.
Controversial because Irish, but Dingle whiskey.
Dingle, and even Waterford's by the ocean as well. So we have got a good few 10. We could possibly put Dornoch Distilleries, not quite in the sea, but you can walk to it. So there's a top 10. And now, you have arrived at your whiskey destination. Gordon leaving and Mike on Glasgow. Get onto the M8. From Port Dundas and Dobie's Loan. That's the A804. You will follow the M80 and the A9 to the A95 in the Highland Council region. Follow the A95 and A94 past Millbury's Country Park, past Glenelgin, past Longmorn, and then you will turn right just before Elgin. Turn right again. And it's all I've got. You have reached your whiskey destination.
Is it
A914 heading to Elgin, but just after Longmorn, turn right off that road before you hit Elgin.
Got it.
Is it Balvenie?
It's not Balvenie.
Does it begin with a B and it's called Benriach?
You are absolutely correct, Gordon. You have arrived at your whiskey destination.
There we go.
A quick word about Benriach. We know a lot of people there.
Yeah, we do. Gosh, Benriach, part of Brown Forman, obviously Jack Daniels. They've repacked all their products. They have great products. Look, I think what was interesting about Benriach a few years ago is they had a range that was like massive when it was under Billy Walker. They had a range of probably 25 bottles, and they've condensed that now. The whiskey as well. Rachel Barry's changed the whiskey. You know, Stuart Buchanan as well there, who's a really good friend of the show, good guy, who's their sort of global ambassador chap, former distillery manager. Great, nice whiskies for sure.
Great whiskies. And if you want to hear anything more from Mr. Buchanan, I think the last episode on board the good ship Cinderella, about 1:30 in the morning. That's all I'm saying. So, listen, we have got the podcast, episode 3, series 7, up and running, Gordon. We are going, and we'll have another episode out much quicker than the last time, but we are back in business.
You didn't ask me what I was drinking, by the way. It was a Tam Dhu 12.
There you go.
It's a nice breakfast dram.
Nice.
Any comments before we head off?
No comments at all. Everybody have a a nice summer. We will continue to produce some content, and we hope you enjoy it. And we will tell you of our travels. And I think actually, just before we go, anybody heading off anywhere nice?
In the Whisky Diary, I've got another festival in Poland at the north, quite close to Gdansk. So
yes,
it's on a
that's
beach.
a good one. It's like a rock concert and a whiskey festival.
It looks like the most rock star thing I think I'll ever do. So
right up your street. I think you'll love that.
Yeah, Glengoyne. I'm doing a wee masterclass for Glengoyne there as well. So
big fans in Poland. Big fans in Poland.
Oh yeah, they like whiskey more than vodka now, which is quite surprising. But I don't blame them. So it's
it's got more flavour.
It has got a better spirit.
Mr. Dallas.
Oh, I have been. This has got me out of my post-holiday depression. I was in Mallorca in the Balearics. Very, very lovely islands. Very hot in the Mediterranean, but if you buy a beach, buy a pool, sipping something cold, you can survive. And luckily I did. And I drove past Mr. Bezos' yacht, which is harboured in Palma. So one of the most expensive yachts in the world, Palma Harbour. But suddenly I wasn't allowed on it for some reason, security. I don't understand. So
you're not a Prime member.
I thought that, yeah.
Yourself, Gordon?
Well, no, we've been sort of busy and doing stuff. We've got a few things coming up, like the Tamdu Dedication Day, which is going to be in about a month's time. And I'm off to China between now and then. So I'm going to Guangzhou, which is just over the border from Hong Kong, ending up in Shanghai. So that will be interesting. I've not been in China for about 4 years, so a little bit of China action, and then back for a bit of Tamdu stuff and Glengoyne things, and yeah, all good. So
and we catch up with Michael Rennie, we'll catch up with Sandy, we'll catch up with other people in the whiskey industry. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Mike, welcome on board the good ship IMD, and you're on the podcast that you've listened to for 60 odd episodes.
You've made it now, Michael.
Made it.
Okay, that's the music. Goodbye.
Podcast.
Goodbye.
Bye.
In good company, doing it this way since 1833, staying ahead on the whiskey trail. Oh, staying ahead on the whiskey trail.